Hi, it's Jen Rubin, editor-in-chief of the Contrarian. With us once again is Rushab Sanghvi, who is the general counsel of the AFGE, which is one of the major unions representing federal employees, and has been a key participant in many of the lawsuits that we have talked about over the past 100 days. Welcome, Rushab.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. You had a big win last week on an effort by the Trump regime to unilaterally suspend the presence of unions in certain departments of the United States government. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure, Jen. So, I think one thing we've been facing is, one of the onslaught of attacks has been the president on March 27 issued an executive order that declared most of our bargaining units, so most of our groupings of employees at various federal agencies, declared that they were no longer able to collectively bargain for national security purposes. That's sort of the essence of it. And the unions who represent federal employees, for us, this is devastating because and for workers in general, because essentially it is trying to eliminate collective bargaining, eliminate unions in the federal sector. And so we filed a lawsuit in California, and then our sibling union, a union who the National Treasury Employees Union, they filed a lawsuit in DC District Court. And just because of the vagaries of court, we're on different schedules. But last week, the NTU, or Treasury Employees Union lawsuit, in that lawsuit, Judge Friedman in DC District Court granted a preliminary injunction enjoining the administration from implementing this executive order stripping collective bargaining of federal employees at various agencies covered by NTU. And so this is a great win because it's pushing back on the Trump administration's attempt to get rid of unions, and again to harm working people and prevent us from joining together in solidarity. And so this is an AFGE's case. Our case is still processing in the Northern District of California, but this case does affect our members as well as certain agencies represented by NTU, and it's a great win.
And just to be clear for our viewers who may not be as familiar with public sector unions, these employees do not have the right to strike. Is that correct? So the notion that somehow they'd leave in the lurch when we have a national security crisis just doesn't make any sense, does it?
That's correct. Federal employees do not have the right to strike. We don't have the right to negotiate wages. And we also we also are constrained in many different ways. That we provide a lot of a collective voice. But the idea that for instance, the scientists at the EPA or the janitors at the Veterans Affairs hospitals are, their primary function is national security. It's ludicrous. I mean, the administration pretty much conceded that this was retaliation against unions who've been fighting back.
So most people, when they think of unions, think of them in the workplace. But what we're seeing in the first 100 days is unions take a much bigger role inside the courtroom and also in public demonstrations. Can you talk a little bit about the central role of organized labor in combating authoritarianism, combating this administration in maybe places people haven't been used to seeing unions be very active?
Of course, Jen, I can try. And as a lawyer, I often have to tell people, right, it's not just, lawsuits. It's not just grievances. It's not just, you think of unions, you think, oh, they're helping fired employees get their job back. That, the main thing behind labor is solidarity. It's a way for us to come together, to organize, and to be out there again in the streets and the courts. And so just as some examples, the court battles are important. But the thing driving the court battles, and so if you look at, AFG in particular, we've been on, like probably a dozen lawsuits at this point in the Trump administration, with our friends from SDDF and Democracy Forward and others. But if you look at the lawsuits we've filed, many of them don't directly affect collective bargaining, don't directly affect the workplace and working conditions, but instead our membership, it's a membership of federal employees who care about the federal government and they care about work rights for all working people. And so together they come together in a union to create structures where they're allowed to elect leaders who have, this sort of, they have the ability to represent 800,000, 300,000 people and fight for all working people. And, that's in some forms that takes, lawsuits like we filed a lawsuit on Inauguration Day, about Doge. And it takes other forms in terms of protests and lobbying on the Hill and lobbying for issues that affect all Americans. And May Day, is coming up, and that's sort of an important day for the labor movement. And there are going to be protests by not only our national union but our affiliates and our members around the country, getting together to sort of to highlight the cause of the working people. And so it's through that grassroots movement, right? Through our members in Omaha, coming together, in Republican and Democratic counties alike, showing that working people, no matter what their political leanings, do not support these attacks on the ability for the middle class American to continue to earn a living wage and to have good working conditions and have a democracy.
And at least in the recent history, labor unions have played such a crucial role that when autocrats have come to power, they have attacked specifically labor unions. So it's a pattern that we've seen over and over again in other countries. I think back to the Cold War and Solidarity, which was the tip of the spear in Poland in terms of the labor movement. Where do you see the next 100 days going in terms of lawsuits, public protest, just the political atmosphere? What are you looking ahead to see in the next few months?
I can hope that we continue to see wins like we've seen before, and again, not just in the legal battles, but on the streets, and in Congress, and we're shifting, we're shifting political, the opinion on the Hill and elsewhere. And I think again, in terms of unions, the reason unions are so important is because it provides that collective voice. It's essentially a tool. The union is a tool for working people to get together, pool their resources, and push back. And I see us continuing to fight. I don't, despite all of the attacks against us, I think we will continue to fight. And as labor, hopefully, we will, as the polls are showing, we will win these next battles, and we will win the midterms, and we will prevent the downfall of American democracy. And I think everyone is starting to understand the importance of this collective action and the importance of labor in this movement.
And final question for you. People who are in a union in the private sector may say, well, this is just the public sector. We're fine here in the private sector. No one's going to try to come after us. What would you say to those people? And looking at the sort of people that Trump has appointed and then tried to remove from the National Labor Relations Board, what would you say to people who are a member of a union that is in the private sector?
I think, whether you're in a union in the private sector or you just work in the private sector in an unorganized workplace, I think it's clear that the administration is attacking working people, attacking the labor movement as a whole. For those private sector unions, you mentioned the NLRB and, Trump's, unlawful termination of Chairman Wilcox. But there are other actions as well. The Trump administration has dismantled the FMCS.
That's the Federal Mediation Service.
Correct. They're planning on, we assume they're planning on dismantling the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board. They are going after all of the governmental entities that make private sector unions possible, that make protections for workers possible. The cuts at the Department of Labor, they're getting rid of NIOSH, which protects workers from hazardous health conditions in the private sector. They don't care about workers. They don't care about labor. And so while they may have not directly come after your union or your employer yet, they're coming after you, and they're coming after the things that make workers in America have fight for their own rights.
Well, thank you, Rushab. Good luck in court and elsewhere, and enjoy yourself on May Day. Are you going to be in the office or out of the office joining a protest on May Day?
Probably a little bit of both.
Very good. Well, thank you so much. And contrarians, we've said it here many times that there is no element of civil society more important than labor unions. And we see it in the organizing on the street, and we see it in the courtrooms, where time and time again, labor has been getting injunctions, stopping the Trump administration. And without them, we would be a lot worse off than we are already. So thanks to our labor friends, and we'll look forward to seeing you again, Rushab. Thanks so much.
Thank you.